Welcome to the XR Magazine podcast. Dive deep with us into the mesmerizing world of immersive tech, where we bring you conversations with the trailblazers of XR, AI, and spatial computing. If you're curious about what's on the horizon and eager to be inspired, you're in the right place. Tune in and let's explore the digital frontier together. Today, we're speaking with Michael Kipfer, who is a principal and design director at Mancini Duffy, who spearheads research and development efforts for the firm. Michael has a decade of experience working in the architectural design industry. Currently, he is the lead project designer and manager for some of Mancini's most significant large-scale master plan development and implementation projects. He is also the co-founder and director of the Design Lab, Mancini's Duffy's research and development wing. In keeping with the firm's commitment to pushing the boundaries within the architecture and interior design industry, the Design Lab is a setting where designers and architects experiment with technologies that can solve issues in design and streamline the design process and integrate them into the firm's practice. Michael formulates goals and directs firm initiatives related to emerging technologies like 3D printing, virtual reality, augmented reality, generative design, and drones. In addition, Kipfer works with in-house software developers and designers to integrate technology into the firm's everyday operations using Mancini's unique 360 design process and patent-pending the Tool Belt software. I can't wait to begin this amazing podcast. Let's do it. Thank you so much, Michael, for being here today. We're super excited to have you here. How is everything going in New York?
Everything's good. Everything's good. It's always a fun place to be. So trying to just enjoy everything.
Yeah, I can imagine. Thank you so much. We'd like to begin with getting to know a little bit more about you, perhaps your background, your story, so we can start to understand all your role in this amazing company and with all your creations.
Definitely. So my name's Michael Kipfer. I'm a principal at Mancini Duffy. It's an architecture, interiors, and planning firm. We're based in New York City, obviously, and we have a really interesting a wing of our firm. It's called the Design Lab, and I help run the Design Lab with a couple other team members at our firm. And then we specifically made a software. We've been developing it over, I guess, the last 8 years, and it's called the Tool Belt.
Wow, that's amazing. I didn't expect that, about the software. We're gonna get into that. But I think that now that you mentioned and went right to the point, I like to know a little bit about the experience of creating the lab, because in traditional architecture, and I've seen this phenomenon, I've spoken with architects myself, and they tell me sometimes the challenges that when they have the vision, architecture is a traditional profession. And sometimes for them, it's difficult to translate this vision into the company where they are. So I am admiring a lot Mancini Duffy because of its own objectives, of its own mission, vision, etc., which is translated in this. They decided to create a design lab. I'd like to know, how was that breakthrough? How did it come to life, and how it is now, the design lab?
Yeah, the Design Lab is, it was a vision kind of brought on by our firm's president, Christian Giordano. And he came to me one day and he said, Michael, we really have to figure out kind of new ways of doing things. Architecture, as you mentioned, is just so traditional, and we need to find the new edge. How do we get the firm kind of producing better design, right? More efficient design. How do we, get the edge with the clients? And how do we just do cool things? I think a lot of us in school, we always get to play with things, and we get to, design really exciting prompts and then we get to the real world, and we kind of get slapped in the face with kind of what reality is, right? So keeping the designers constantly thinking and keeping them engaged so that someone doesn't kind of fall into kind of a tunnel vision has always been a big goal of the design lab, just an incubator for the firm to keep us going and to keep us kind of relevant.
That's amazing. I was gonna mention, yeah, that's an important part, specifically in the architecture field. And is that I've also heard many of them saying in engineering something similar happens as well. But I've been hearing them saying, I thought I was gonna create these amazing buildings in the world, right? Like buildings that don't exist, because in during the studies you take a lot of time to try to develop that side, the creativity, materials, and bringing many methodologies together. But when they are in the workplace, they are faced with the situation of, okay, so we have to create a complex apartment, and it's a cookie cutter. just just handling documentation, all of these things, boring things. But it's amazing that Mancini decided to do this. And so in the design lab, what type of technologies or what type of specific projects do you use to bring to life that creativity that you're speaking, so they can integrate it in the firm?
Yeah, so the design lab focuses really on anything, but a couple of the key technologies that we really like to explore are definitely virtual reality and augmented reality, or under the vague cover of mixed reality. And then we also explore 3D printing, different ways to kind of manufacture different types of product design or architectural design, interior design. Specifically in 3D printing, though, I always like to say architects are always known for making 3D printed replicas or scale models of their buildings, but 3D printing offers a lot more than just scale replicas. It's a way to really take an idea and bring it to life in the form of product design. So what we've been exploring a lot in the lab with our designers is, tabletop objects or furniture objects or installations that could be installed over a wall or on a ceiling, lighting fixtures, things like that, that the 3D printer could help you realize to full scale, 3D printing full scale objects instead of 3D printing smaller scale replica objects. Other areas we explore are definitely AI these days. So there's a lot of stuff out there right now with AI. We specifically have been just looking at ways that AI could help our design process. We're obviously not looking for it to completely overtake things, but just using it as a tool. And so what we do is we have a lot of our team members take the various types of softwares, web prompts, things like that, and find ways that it could help us and assist us and create kind of a maybe like a rule book or some sort, so that all of our designers at the firm can better understand how to use it to help them. There's a lot of stuff we do in the lab, definitely like parametric modeling, writing scripts to help you detail a facade really fast, or writing a script to help you test fit, let's call it 80 desks over an office area, instead of having you to do it all by hand. So a lot of things that just streamline our process and enhance our design ideas.
Yeah, that sounds super interesting, particularly, of course, the integration with artificial intelligence, because again, architecture has been a very traditional field, and sometimes there is a barrier there in terms of how much we could actually implement it without being so obtrusive with the work that we do, because sometimes we have to go through those evolution process. But speaking about that, how particularly you're using these type of technologies? Is it concept? Is it rendering? Is it what stages specifically? And what have you learned from the process? What things do you feel that still it cannot work for certain things?
It's definitely toward the beginning of the design process that we're starting to experiment with the AI models. Particularly just so I guess an easy way to think about this is when we get a client, one of the first things we do is a visioning session. And a lot of times you'll take previous projects that you've done, and you'll post them up on a wall and you'll say, hello client, which of these spaces compels you, what space inspires you, what space is really close to your vision, and through various types of colors, materials, textures, glass facades versus metal facades, or blue colors versus gray colors. The clients start to pick things, pictures, and we start to narrow in on maybe what their aesthetic will look like. But there's only so many images out there. A lot of times just Google or Pinterest or things like that, we'll make these collages to help the clients see what they like. But what's really interesting with AI, especially some of the image generation models, is we can still generate images of an environment or of an idea, and give them that selective interactive process of them trying to talk about what they like. But it doesn't have to be very, you don't have to find it on Google. You can actually use your imagination. Mm-hmm. So if I say, let's say we're doing a restaurant and the client's talking about, I want something dark and moody and subterranean, or I want to have a lot of woods, or I want a mid-century inspired thing, we can start using the prompts and those image generators to really think about okay, what is the aesthetic, or what are attributes that go into the aesthetic of subterranean, right? And you can start creating these moods and these scenes and have the client react to them. Mm-hmm. And then what we can do as designers is actually take that, whatever is coming out of there. Obviously, we calibrate it extremely. It's not like we just type something and then show it to the client. It's constant iterations of okay, what is the mood that's in my mind right now, without me having to completely model it or Photoshop it. And it's all just for a very simple exercise. So we take that kind of final mood, and then we start going into actual conception, actual form finding in some of more of our traditional ways, or maybe not traditional ways, because we're still using video game engines and advanced modeling techniques, but we start to apply more of the process where our hand is actually creating things instead of AI. So it's kind of it's a very beginning vision that I think it helps us create at a faster rate than maybe some traditional methods.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. You mentioned maybe not so much of traditional because you're using game engines or things like that. How you are using it or integrating in the process, that sounds super interesting, because these are tools that used to be known for other fields, but now we're seeing it entering into other more traditional fields like engineering, construction, architecture. So how you particularly are using these engines?
Yeah, it's actually been kind of a centerpiece of the lab, and one of the main initiatives that we have. So, if you go back about 8 years ago, when we were kind of just talking about the lab, Christian and myself, VR was kind of at its early infancy. When I say VR, virtual reality, in not early infancy as it was just being created, but in the architectural world, the accessibility to virtual reality, you had to know very specific software. You had to know how to export and prep your models. And you had to know a bit of coding as well, just to make sure your materials mapped and you were able to walk around a space and not, fall through the floor and fall into affinity. So, we kept on saying, how do we get this virtual reality tool to where everyone in our office could use it. All of our clients would have access to it, and it could be a little bit more user friendly. And we actually went out and hired a full-time developer to work at our firm, internally, all overhead, all R&D budget. And his name's Jeff Anderson. He's still with us and still, cranking away at the software we ended up developing. We call it the tool belt. And it all started just with, how do we get this out of our architectural software? So our architectural software, we use mostly Autodesk Revit. And in Revit, you have extremely detailed models. It knows the thicknesses of the walls. It knows that when you draw a wall, it's a bunch of studs and gyp and things like that. Whereas, in other kind of more old school CAD formats, when you draw a wall, you're really just drawing a box that looks like a wall. But Revit knows kind of everything. And sometimes when you're talking about virtual reality, it's really, it's way too detailed for someone to walk around in VR and have to process all that geometry at once. So our biggest thing when we sat down is, how do we make everyone's computer not overheat when it's processing all this information? And so we made the exporter, and it basically distilled down our complex models into very simple geometry that the rendering engine, the VR engine could handle, and people wouldn't get sick with, lower frame rates and things like that. And then once that went through, and we got kind of our first successful export, without having to go into that, the coding languages and things like that. We started putting it in front of clients. So, clients would go inside one of our spaces, and they'd look around, and then they just started asking to do things. And that kind of made us make ways to do things inside VR. And that's why we call it the tool belt. So we basically just started making tools. So I remember one of our first clients came in, it was a restaurant space, and he said, well, can I move that table? I want these two tables to be closer together. And we were like, we need a move tool. And then I think like 2 weeks later, he came back and said, well, what's the distance between these tables? And we were like, okay, we need a tape measure tool. And then later, I guess 2 or 4 weeks later, he's like, can I change this from wood to metal? And we were like, we need a material tool. And it just kept on building and building and building. And it became this very interactive process that we've really enjoyed with our clients, where you're kind of getting direct feedback. You're not just on this 2D presentation and marking up a PDF and asking people what they think. They're kind of telling you what they think because they're experiencing it, and they're changing it, right? They're moving the table. They don't say move the table 3 inches, because quite honestly, they don't know to move the table 3 inches. It's the feel, right? They go, this seems about right. And then we tell them that you just moved the table 4 inches. So it's a very, you get constant feedback instead of just kind of boring 2D presentations that take a long time to export.
Yeah, I think that you mentioned things there that are super, super important, because now we're not speaking only about architecture. Now we're into the field of tech and apps, and which requires other type of optimization. So this is like a merging now that is happening. And I found that very interesting. It is usually said, with the minimum viable product, the best way to create this is that the actual client or potential client you're building it as they are telling you what to do, right? That's the best way, rather than building the whole tool and then waiting to see what happens. So that experience there is a great example for us of how these big companies create these experiences and make sure on the way that it's actually what people is looking for. And so one issue that is big, that is in the industry, most people know about this, is the need for optimization. I think in architecture, at least that is my feeling about it. When I want to experience a property that I want to see built in real life, I expect these spaces with certain level of realism, right? I don't expect something that is a little bit cartoonish, because then it feels the actual look of how is that this is going to be for me to foresee in the future. That's how the house is going to be, let's say. So in terms of achieving that balance between realism performance for the optimization, what have been your breakthroughs? What if you have any example, or what have been lessons that you've learned based on that? Because coming to work from Revit to now using the platform, I guess there might be some challenges there.
Yeah, I mean, it's two sides, the optimization of your technical model, and then the optimization of what your client's experiencing, right? And in the code, we have a lot of really unique features in the exporter that Jeff was able to develop that it kind of just rearranges things in a way that the VR engine can do things. I'm trying to think of a good example. So it auto tags all the floors, and because in Revit knows that a floor is a floor and a ceiling is a ceiling and a wall is a wall. So it's starting to take all those things and peel back all of the layers. But I think our biggest thing we realized is when we put clients into the picture of having to use this technology, not all of our clients are architects, obviously, and they don't all have super complex computers. We as architects normally have more powerful computers than normal people, but trying to find ways for everyone to be able to use this has been a big challenge. I remember the first time we had a client try it on their computer. It literally went blue screen of death, and the RAM had overheated everything, and we felt horrible. I think we ended up offering to buy them a new computer. But so it got really intense really quick. And it's only things that you really know until you get it out in front of people, which is a little sidetrack of like, we really enjoy having our clients be part of our R&D process. We want them to be with us. We always say we don't want all the geeks in the basement and hiding everything until it's perfect. We want constant iteration and constant feedback. But ultimately, the optimization that we ended up finding was a web-based platform that we were able to host everything online, so that the complex computing that was happening was actually happening in the cloud. And then it was able to just send certain types of feedback to the actual headset and computer screens themselves. And what that also did is allow us to reach both PCs and Macs in that process. But the other optimization, or I guess efficiencies that we're finding with the tool belt, you mentioned aesthetics and photo real versus cartoony and things like that. We're finding a lot of success when we use VR during the design process with our operators. So, for example, companies that have logistics and, let's say, big loading dock fleets, or assembly lines, or companies like restaurants who have chefs. Every single kitchen, every single production facility is a little different. And we never imagined how useful it would be for them to actually act out how they'd be using the space, not from how it looks, but how everything is laid out, put together. Sometimes we'll get multiple people in VR, and the two chefs will communicate to each other, and we'll adjust shelf heights and things like that. In a kitchen, communication is really big, especially between all of the chefs. And having that kind of testing the space out functionally and not just aesthetically has been really interesting to see kind of all the various clients that we have kind of go through there, and what types of things they change in their design that they probably wouldn't have picked up just from like a 2D CAD block.
Yeah, that sounds very interesting. And by the way, now that we're speaking a little bit more onto the experience that is not just coming into a building, a virtual or digital building, and just looking around, there are even more things that clients can do there. Interact with elements, as you were saying before, which put us into the sometimes indirectly using traditional tools that have been used in gaming. So I wonder how has been the view of you as an architectural firm using elements from gaming? Have you incorporated some? Yes or no? Have you had experiments tests with that?
Yeah, it's actually funny. The other day we ended up we altered a gaming system, steering wheel and pedal, for one of our clients has this big complex they're making into a company. That complex is a parking garage, simple parking garage, but it has to house Sprinter vans. And they asked if they could test drive their fleet of Sprinter vans inside the parking garage. And so we hooked up a steering
Mhm.
wheel and a gas pedal that's digital, obviously, that you normally use for video games and things like that. And we threw them into the VR model with the steering wheel, and they got to test out their Sprinter vans through the parking garage, which was pretty interesting. We all got a kick out of just the gamified experience
Mhm.
of design, and things that you pick up on, and also just having fun inside of your environment. I will say every time there's physics engines inside virtual environments, gravity, things like that. We always have to turn that off because our clients sit there and they throw their furniture all around and make it like bounce off things and float on things. So we always have to kind of keep them a little bit more on task with when turning the physics off.
Otherwise, they keep playing.
Oh yeah, they keep on playing.
It's
Yeah.
so fun. It's so fun. And I this is a huge breakthrough for a traditional architect. I think this is like seeing another perspective, another thing. It's like, oh, where this is going now? Like if this is happening now. So that's interesting. And speaking about that, what are your thoughts? Like it's every human being have a specific idea about interacting with the technology, the direct results that they see, the interactions with the clients, their behaviors, etc. Plus what we know that might be their interesting applications with the technology, we use our imagination, etc. So based on those things, I wonder, where do you think that particularly architecture is going? Like I imagine, for example, AI at some point is going to deeply merge with XR. So we're going to have spaces that are intelligent, and that is going to have sort of like intelligent beings in it. What are your thoughts about where do you feel that this is going, especially in architecture? What have been your reflections?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, there's just so many roads and paths that it can go down. And,
Mhm.
you know, architecture, just as an industry as a whole, there's a lot of different types of architects out there, and there's a lot of different types of projects. There's small projects, big projects, residential projects, commercial projects.
Mhm.
And then even within those categories, there's 15,000 square foot projects, and then there's 2 million square foot projects. And um, every single firm has a different way of doing things. And I think there's different technologies that really fit each individual project. When it comes to kind of, the AI takeover or whatever people are theorizing, I really do think there's so many nuts and bolts to design. And there's no way that AI is going to be able to do kind of completely take over the job. But do I think it will redirect? I certainly do. I think that um, you know there are standards out there. There's a reason a door is normally 7 feet tall and 3 feet wide, because that's the average way of doing things. When you get into complex, specialized design, maybe it changes a little, but there are a lot of typical inputs that AI and generative design and computer learning could could make easier for us, so that we can actually focus on the things that need designed, need advancement, can envision new ways of doing things, new ways of creating things. That's any architect's dream. We were talking about, school earlier. everyone's dream is to create a new environment and a new way of feeling, a new aesthetic, things like that. And perhaps maybe AI's place is just to do the mundane things that is standardized so that we can focus on the fun things and not the mundane things.
Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, that's amazing. Definitely, there are like different avenues and different applications. We could even spend way more time discussing about another topic that I wanted to speak, but we can add a couple of notes later about 3D printing and drones, because it seems you also experiment with drones and scanning method, etc., which is another another way, like huge field. I'm excited, so I'm mentioning here what is the lab doing, but I like to close maybe with certain specific questions related with the tool belt that you mentioned. So right now is a tool that is very, of course, part of the research and part of maybe practical insights and methods for Mancini Duffy. But do you plan to have this tool, or is it open to other architectural firms, or how do you envision the involvement of the tool?
Yeah, it's a good question. We actually had a summer initiative to try to bring the tool belt a little bit more external facing. Right now, it is an exclusive tool that everyone in Mancini Duffy uses. It is available online at thetoolbelt.com, but it's in a beta form. Obviously, when you have a complex software like that, um, you never know what's going to happen. So outside users do have it. They can always contact us if they want to test it. But we do have a version coming out here, I think probably in the next three months, that will be available for download. Obviously, it will have a couple watermarks about beta on it, just because we don't want to overpromise things. But it is the intention for it to be external. I think with that, we really do believe in design, and we believe in kind of resources and efficiencies, and that doesn't have to be just Mancini. And I think accessibility to technology is a big thing that I think this profession needs. Not about all kind of like the black cape firms. It's more of the smaller firms, maybe not in New York City, but kind of anywhere in the US or even the world that maybe doesn't have the resources that a firm like Mancini Duffy has. We're a larger firm in the grand scheme of things, and we do get to play with technology on a daily basis, which is always fun. But I do think access to technology outside of our firm would be something that we could do, for others. And I think it's something that, Mancini is committed to just kind of opening the discussion of that technology. And quite honestly, it will help us make it better. When more users use it, we get more feedback.
Yeah, that's exciting. That right there is super, super great to hear, because when you were mentioning that there was a method that was used, of course, we have to test it and help, of course, the tool to grow with feedback. But when you were mentioning those particular capabilities of helping, especially with that optimization, or that is something like a good tool that we are looking for. Just is for sure. So thank you so much for sharing that. Is there anything else that you wish I had asked you today, Michael?
I don't know. I mean, I feel like I probably talked too much. We definitely went through a lot. Yeah, I think it's definitely just it's a fun space for us. And I think going back to just the design lab in general, I think there's, if architecture had to have a ROI, I think it would be decision making. And I think extracting decision making out of your clients, but also being able to make decisions internally, both with your kind of your inner workings of your own mind as a designer, and with your teammates. And I think, the biggest thing out of the lab is just how do you improve decision making? And I think all these tools, all these technologies really help with that. 3D printing, virtual reality, AI, things like that. It's just getting the decisions made to make a better design, a more efficient design for you and your clients.
Yeah, that sounds exciting. So could you please let us know before we go again the website where people can start checking and becoming familiar with the tool?
Yeah, so our website is thetoolbelt.com. And so that's Toolbelt's specific website. It's branded outside of Mancini because when we first made it, we figured it might grow outside one day. So it has its own website. And then obviously our firm and more research projects that we've been doing in the design lab can be found at manciniduffy.com.
That sounds great. Thank you so much. This has been an amazing, insightful conversation because this intersection with architecture, design, art, technology is a unique one as we see right now. Even it has sparked in myself the role of architects, designers. Is like architects, designers have to come one, or what's going on? So that's super interesting always to discuss these breakthroughs. Thank you so much. It has been amazing. And we wish you all the best with the tool belt. We, of course, definitely we're going to invite anybody to check the tool so that we can start to gain these insights on where the technology is going, what you guys have been doing, and how these type of tools can help us with our own projects. Thank you so much, and see you in the next episode. Bye for now.
All right, thank you.